Uh, Hello, everyone. Today is the 20th of April, and we are meeting for the CICD UX meeting. And starting off with the general announcement. So we are approaching the end of quarter first for financial year 22-23. So I think it's a good time to go back and review our OKR progress and drop a note if we are apprehensive of kind of reaching any of the KRs mentioned. And that's it. There's just one general announcement this week. All right. So I think, yeah, Katie, to you.
Yeah, I don't have actually that much to report on this week because it's been lots of holidays and whatnot. But this week I'll be doing some survey development interviews in preparation for releasing a survey. So Erica gave me this idea. So what I'm going to do is have some customers take the survey kind of in front of me, and then I can kind of prompt them with questions and make sure that the survey is actually asking the right questions and covering everything we want to know and make sense. So that'll be tomorrow and the next day. And I just put a small request for design feedback that just occurred today in a Slack message. We have this case where we have to put an alert inside of a table. And I did read the pajamas guidelines, and it says it's acceptable to put alerts in context, but I haven't actually seen them in a table. And I just wanted to check with the UX team if that's acceptable or if it's weird. And my last point was just asking the group if anyone's leveraged data to make design decisions and what the process was like. I've been chatting with the growth team a little bit about their process, and I'd really like to start having like measures of success for design issues in package. And yeah, I'm just looking for some starting points.
So we haven't really been using data a lot on the pipeline authoring team to measure success of design issues. However, in the past couple milestones, I started really strictly using our complete issue template for the design issues, and all of them have a section for metrics. So I noticed that that's been a good kind of like a prompt for PM and I about it, and to try to set some metrics that we will be tracking for this feature. And now we're starting just to instrument new metrics wherever we need them and so on. So we're very early in the process, but yeah, we've been talking about it. I just don't have any historical data to share with you how it worked out for us.
And is it typically just the engineers who are implementing the data, and do they go to some kind of like CSense dashboards? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, so the first step would be for us to check if this is something that we can get right away from looking at our dashboards. Sometimes we can get that data. Otherwise, we talk to our engineers, and we might have to open an issue to look into how we can get the data with our engineers. And if necessary, we might also have to reach out to our data team, whatever their name is, but we have like a team responsible for that.
Cool, thanks.
So I know from like I was also trying to set up something for pipeline execution, and that's when I went back to a UX showcase video by Michael, where he had talked about how he made certain decisions about the navigation by looking at the data. And I created an issue for pipeline execution. I'm not able to find it right away, but we haven't worked on that yet. We haven't set up the tracking or instrumentation yet, because even for that, we would need some engineering bandwidth, which at this point we don't have. But that video is a really good source. I think you should watch it.
Cool, will do. Thank you. Cool. Should we move on to Nadia?
Yeah.
All right. So this week I'm starting to refine the MVC proposal for the private CICD component catalog. We're going to pursue the private CI/CD component catalog first rather than the public one. This is just a business decision. Also, it seems easier for us in terms of implementation, and this is the catalog that we would be able to dog food more easily, because we could have a private CI/CD catalog for the GitLab team. So our idea is to create a private CI/CD catalog process. So it's a process for publishing a CI/CD component and using the CI/CD component that some of our team could use. And we're looking at, I think, our infrastructure team, maybe the productivity team, and maybe, I forgot what's their team name is, but the team that manages FAST and DAST scans and so on. I think it's Secure, maybe, something like that, I guess. Yeah, it checks the vulnerabilities in your code, so must be secure. Yeah, so right now I'm defining the user flows, and I can actually open up my Figma and very quickly share it, since I think we'll have some time for that. Okay. So we're trying to reuse the existing UI as much as possible for this flow. So the idea here is that to publish a component in the CI/CD catalog, you will be using the project's UI, documentation instructions, and our existing UI for creating branch tags and making a release. So you would start with reading through the instructions for, like, step-by-step instructions for creating your component in the docs. Then you would have to create a new project, and we're planning to utilize the template function for that. So you can create a project from a template, and there would be a template to create a CI/CD component. Then you would use that project to create your component YAML and README files. Component YAML, it's where the actual component like pipeline code will be, and README file will contain all of the usage instructions for that component. Once that component is published, we will pull this information into the CI/CD catalog page, where you will be able to see the usage guidelines for the component and actually use the component, like on the developer side. So once you, so this is basically just the usual kind of merge request flow. You review the files with your team, ensure that everything looks good. Once all of your files are in order and you think that the component is ready to be used by your organization, you would create a version tag by going to repository and tags. So we already have a UI for that. And you would publish the component by making a release, which would trigger that component to become available in your private CI/CD component catalog. It would be like a top level page that lives inside GitLab, but it's kind of like, it's separate from your project's UI. It's kind of similar in its location to the project's dashboard that you have. So it's kind of like, it's project agnostic. So the component would become available in the component catalog, and you can access the catalog either by going to gitlab.com/CICD components, or you can just access it from the CICD navigation. So if you want to use the component as a developer of a project in an organization, so your platform team would make these components available to you or your DevOps engineers, and then as a developer, if you need to use it for your application project, you just go to the CI/CD components in your CI/CD navigation, or you can access the catalog directly. You select the component to be used. You open the component page where you can see all of the usage guidelines, and we will pull this information from the component project README. All of the component info will be pulled from the project component project that's been created. You would be able to select the component version And from there, the flow is to copy the code snippet for including the component. And then using whatever editor you prefer, you have to paste that snippet into your pipeline and do some customizations. From there, you would have to customize variables and maybe some other parameters that I'm not aware of yet to make it work. But all of that information would be inside the component README. So we would show that on the component page. Yeah, so these are like the two major flows that I have for now. And aside from that, I'm also looking into the discovery, like how do you discover this feature at all? And then also how do you discover the components to use for the developer application project? It's probably going to be pretty minimal for the MVC, considering our goal is to dog food. So I can imagine a lot of this will be slashed from the MVC, but still I'm kind of exploring those flows. And then I'm working on flows for releasing a new version of the component, so updating a component and how it will work with developers opting into the updates or like updating the version. And then it's a whole new story. How do you unpublish a component and make sure it doesn't break anyone's pipelines? Yeah, so if you have any feedback at this point, let me know. We're trying to reuse the existing AI as much as possible and keep it super simple, but I'm also trying to see how we can make it, how we can make the flow more natural, because you have to jump around the UI a lot. It's kind of very disjointed.
Okay. One small clarification that I just wanted to, I needed from you was a complete GitLab CI YAML. We can say that it is constituted by many components.
So a CI/CD component is any part of the pipeline that can be included inside of your pipeline. So the difference here is that instead of copy and pasting the whole template into your GitLab CI YAML, you would just say include SAS test in this pipeline, and it just gets imported. It works kind of the same as importing a component into your file.
Got it. And for the creation part is very clear, but I'm just trying to think of like, what would you say is the jobs to be done, which is associated with the second part of the user flow that you had showed, which is using the component.
Yeah, so we don't have a validated job to be done for that. So yeah, I also have much lower confidence for the part of actually using the component. But the job to be done would be something like when I'm creating a pipeline for my application project, I want to easily find, or like I want to easily create a reliable and compliant pipeline for my project, like with the resources provided to me. The main theme here that we notice is that developers don't want to learn YAML. They don't want to have to figure out what they need to use for their project. Ideally, they would have those components provided to them, and there's some guidelines. Generally, the organization provides some guidelines. Hey, if you're working on a project, your pipeline needs to have this kind of test. It needs to include this, include that. For compliance, it also needs to run those kinds of scripts. And as a developer, you just say, include this, include this, include this, and the pipeline just runs.
Got it. And I think it would still mostly be used by DevOps engineers, right? Because at least in enterprises, developers won't have the access to edit a YAML file.
So what we've seen, it really varies from organization to organization and how their teams are set up. Sometimes developers are also maintaining pipelines. So they may not have permissions to just like push to main, but usually anyone can contribute to the YAML file. So it's usually kind of collaborative effort. The platform team or infra DevOps team provides some resources and guidelines. And ideally, they would just automatically create pipelines for everyone, but also the project developers typically have the knowledge about the project that also the platform team may not have and have some specific special needs.
Right.
So yeah, so they do create pipelines, but there's lots of nuance there. It's also something that we need to gather more insights about, like what are those differences and how they collaborate.
Got it. Thanks for answering all of that. I think Katie has a comment
Yeah,
there.
just had a one comment which we talked about briefly in our sync, which is the user flow feels so similar to the package and container registries, and which is like, I want to publish a thing maybe more as like a DevOps kind of person, and then I just want developers to consume it, and there's kind of certain permissions. And one of the problems that we're trying to solve in package, or something that we need to do research on, is like currently all of our things are tied to a repository, and that may not make sense for the way that users want to use our product. And this feels kind of similar. It feels kind of like you just want to have a repository of components that everyone can access without too much dramas that aren't necessarily tied to a repository. So yeah, I'm just like more of a comment and not a question, but yeah, I see a lot of overlap, and like, yeah, we could probably learn from each other's research.
Yeah, we also have some concerns that we might encounter some limitations there because of using the project workflow for this, and using a repo for each component. But at least for the MVC, it gives us so many things for free that already exist that it makes sense to use it. But yeah, let's keep each other posted on any related findings. Okay, so the rest is kind of read only, but I'll quickly verbalize. In 15.0, I'll be working with Jeremy and the tech writing team to define the guidelines for using drawers for help content. And we'll be considering such things as the drawer accessibility, the content guidelines, how we're going to pull in information from our documentation into the drawer, how it's going to work with markdown styling and whatnot. And what are some additional component features that are necessary to make it work. For example, we're considering making the drawer resizable for users, so they're able to consume more long form information more comfortably in the drawer. And then there's some other similar considerations that we're going to be discussing. And another thing is that the official GitLab brand refresh announcement is coming soon, and there's a lot of prep work that's happening for that. And once the brand refresh guidelines are announced, we're going to update the GitLab illustrations throughout the product to match the new brand guidelines. So currently we're starting to work on an audit for all illustrations in the product to see what illustrations are used, how are they used. We have lots of illustrations that aren't used in the product, like dozens of them that exist in the library, but not in the product. So we want to fix that. Like, we don't want to have that bloat. So obviously maybe those illustrations we wouldn't update, maybe we would deprecate them. So yeah, we're going to be considering things like that.
Nice. All right, moving on to mine. So this week I checked. I checked the progress that I've made with the OKRs, and it seems that I do not have much control over the S1 implementations because our team has limited availability of developers, and all the designs for S1 and S2s are already provided. So I'm taking this week, this particular milestone kind of to work on the foundational stuff for the stage group. And that's where I decided to revise the jobs to be done mapping for pipeline execution. That's what I'm focusing on this week, at least. I am going to apply all the learnings that I've had from all of our experiences. And I'll try to do it differently this time. And also, I'm also looking at more effective methodologies. So if anyone knows something that I should be looking at, please share it with me. And once I'm at a good place with the mapping, like once I have all the primary stuff there on the board in front of me, I'll be sharing it with the larger team, with all of you, to understand how we should be handling the overlapping pieces. And there's a very interesting challenge that I have kind of identified that we'll be facing in this effort, and that's with the CI scaling category, because that is technically a non-marketable category. It's the work that falls under CI scaling is mostly what we are doing in preparation to handle a huge amount of like to handle anything that relates to scaling with continuous integration. So for example, how would many people, thousands of employees in, let's say, an enterprise would be working with the pipelines? Would our infrastructure be able to handle all the tasks that they would be performing? So there's not one job to be done that we can probably zero down on for this, because it applies to everything that users would be doing in pipeline execution. So we do have a maturity plan for that, and it will be interesting to kind of figure out how we are going to assess it. So I'm creating an async issue where I'll be involving the backend engineers, the product manager, to understand like what is it, like what are we considering as goals for ourselves when we are talking about maturity. And once that is clear, then we'll be discussing about how we want to assess the maturity, how we want to measure it. And that's pretty much all from my side, because I've been busy with the design MBA, which by the way is coming to an end this week. So I'm excited about sharing the learnings from there as well.
Woohoo! Exciting. I wanted to ask about the CI scaling category, because I think it's something that's also relevant for the pipeline authoring team, but we don't really think about it that much. Like, it's actually the first time that I learned about the CI scaling categories during our one-on-one this week, Vitika, when you mentioned it. So what are some of the things that you're looking into as part of this category? Like, are there any themes specifically that are emerging, and do you see any overlap with pipeline authoring?
There's no obvious overlap with authoring, but then when we talk about continuous integration, we kind of talk about both pipeline authoring and pipeline execution.
Mm-hmm.
So most challenges that we face with scaling is when the pipelines are running, I guess, when the runners are working. So I'm going to share the category page with you here. This is the category direction we have for continuous integration scaling. So if you see the vision items, it's mostly around CICD data model and improving runner job queuing. Then it's mostly around runner and what we are doing when the pipelines are running.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, I guess for us, CI scaling, like making it more usable for very large teams. For pipeline authoring, it looks like making the process of enabling developers in their organizations to create pipelines easier, more effective. So the CI catalog is part of that. But yeah, we haven't really considered like what are how are the workflows different for organizations that are really like on the extreme side.
Yeah. So one thing that I have proposed as a part of my growth and development plan is I want to kind of start an effort which would be around creating frameworks for designing for scalability. And this is going to be like all of us would be involved, because each one of us here is facing challenges when it comes to like incorporating scalability in our respective stage group features. So yeah, that's something that's in discussion, and I'll share more as I hear more.
Cool, sounds very interesting.
And that's all. What else do we have? So there are 2 UX research threads, one by Will and one by Erica. Both are prioritization issues. And please go and have a look there if you want to check like what's the priority for this quarter. I mean, for the upcoming quarter mostly. And that's it. And we are on time with 3 minutes to spare. That's great. All right, then.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I just noticed we also have, oh, it's from, no, never mind. I thought we had manager announcements underneath, but it was already the agenda for the previous meeting that we had.
Yeah. Today was short. All right. Bye. Have a good day, everyone.